Bitcoin. You've probably heard the word 1,000 times. It sparks all these images of, digital fortunes and crazy future tech. But behind all that hype, there's a really fascinating story about why it was even created. So, in this explainer, we're going to pull back the curtain and really get to the bottom of the idea that kicked off a financial revolution. To really get Bitcoin, our story doesn't start with computers or with code. Nope. We have to go back in time to a moment when the entire global financial system was, well, teetering right on the edge of a cliff. So what you're looking at here, this isn't just some random newspaper clipping. This exact headline was permanently embedded into the very first block of Bitcoin, what's known as the Genesis block. You can think of it like a digital time capsule, a message in a bottle left by its creator, pointing us directly to the reason Bitcoin was born.
I mean, the world was just in shock. The financial system that we all depended on, the one we were told was safe, was crumbling. Trust was completely shattered. People just watched as the very institutions that were supposed to protect their money made these catastrophic decisions that led to a global meltdown. It was a really painful lesson in the dangers of a centralized system where just a few powerful players hold all the cards.
And right in the middle of all this chaos, a paper quietly appears online. It was published by this mysterious person, or maybe a group we still don't know, who went by the name Satoshi Nakamoto. And they basically pinpointed the core problem. Our entire financial world relied on trusting banks and governments, the very institutions that had just proven they could fail us. And Satoshi's solution? Well, it was radical. The idea was, what if we could send money directly from one person to another anywhere in the world without needing a bank or some other middleman to approve it or take a cut? This was way more than just a new piece of tech. It was a proposal for a completely different way of thinking about money itself. But of course, a brilliant idea is just an idea until you can actually prove that it works. So let's look at the exact moment this whole theory was put to the test and became a reality. And things moved so fast in January of 2009. On the 3rd, that first block was mined. Less than a week later, the software was out in the wild. One of the very first people to jump on board was a respected cryptographer named Hal Finney. He famously tweeted, "Running Bitcoin," and just 2 days later, he received 10 Bitcoin directly from Satoshi. This was it, the world's very first Bitcoin transaction. Now you have to understand, at that moment, those 10 Bitcoin had zero monetary value. Like you couldn't buy a stick of gum with them. But what that transaction represented, it was absolutely priceless. It was the proof of concept. The system actually worked. The idea had officially jumped from the page into the real world. Okay, so we know why it was created, but how does it actually work? I mean, how does it function without a bank or a CEO or anyone in charge? Let's break down the core principles. This right here is the absolute heart of Bitcoin, decentralization. Think about your bank. They have one central private ledger of all the transactions, and they control it completely. Bitcoin just flips that whole idea on its head. Its ledger is public, and it's copied and shared across thousands of computers all over the planet. No single person, no company, no government owns it. And because the code is open source, literally anyone can take part. So if there's no bank, how do you prove the money is yours? Well, the answer is cryptography, which I know sounds complicated, but the basic idea is pretty simple. You get 2 keys. Your public key is kind of like your email address or your bank account number. You can share it with anyone, no problem, so they can send you funds. But your private key, well, that's like your password. It's a secret that only you should ever know, and it's what gives you the power to actually spend your funds. And here's where the magic really happens. When you want to spend your Bitcoin, you use that secret private key to sign the transaction. This digital signature is like unbreakable mathematical proof that you and only you authorize that payment. The entire network of computers can instantly verify it without needing a bank to give the thumbs up. And once a transaction is confirmed, it's locked into the blockchain forever. That is true digital ownership. So, because of all these really unique properties, a powerful new story started to form around Bitcoin, one that has really driven its adoption way beyond just being a simple peer-to-peer cash system. This number is everything. It's the reason for that whole digital gold story. There will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin, period. Not one more can ever be created. Think about it for a second. Governments can print more money whenever they want, right? Which can, of course, devalue the money you've saved. Bitcoin is completely different. Its supply is fixed, it's predictable, and it's hard-coded right into its DNA. This built-in scarcity is exactly why so many people started to see it not just as a currency, but as a potential store of value, kind of like a digital version of gold.
And this whole digital gold idea, it really started to catch on. I mean, what was once a niche hobby for a few tech geeks began to seriously enter the mainstream. We saw huge public companies like MicroStrategy and Tesla adding Bitcoin to their balance sheets. And then in 2024, a massive step: the approval of Bitcoin ETFs in the United States, which basically opened the floodgates for mainstream investors to get involved in a way that just wasn't possible before.
But the story isn't all just about rising prices and mainstream adoption. To have a really complete picture, we have to look at the very real risks and the huge debates that are still swirling around Bitcoin's future. It's absolutely crucial to look at the other side of the coin, so to speak. Bitcoin is famous, or maybe infamous, for its wild price swings. Its energy use has sparked really intense debates. Governments all over the world are still trying to figure out how to regulate it. And, like any new financial frontier, it has unfortunately attracted its fair share of scammers and bad actors. This slide is a perfect example of that volatility in action. What you're looking at is how a few tweets from one really influential person, in this case Elon Musk, seem to trigger these massive swings in Bitcoin's price. It's just a stark reminder of how much the market can be moved by news and public sentiment alone. And then there's the energy debate. The process that secures the Bitcoin network is called proof of work, and it requires this global network of powerful computers all working to solve complex puzzles. And yes, this uses a tremendous amount of electricity. As this chart shows, it's comparable to the energy consumption of entire countries like Argentina. And this has, quite understandably, led to a major, ongoing debate about Bitcoin's environmental footprint. And finally, you've got the regulatory puzzle. Governments are still trying to decide what Bitcoin even is. Is it a currency, a commodity, an asset? Here in the US, for example, the IRS treats it as property. That means if you buy a coffee with some Bitcoin that's gone up in value since you bought it, you could technically owe capital gains tax on that coffee. Yeah. This kind of uncertainty creates real headaches for everyday people and investors. So that brings us to the final question. After more than a decade, Bitcoin has proven to be incredibly resilient, but its challenges are just as real as its potential. Is it a brilliant solution born from a crisis that's going to reshape our financial world? Or is it a volatile, energy-intensive experiment with a really uncertain end? Well, the debate continues, and honestly, only time will tell.